Hi, I'm Conrad Marshall, and from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, welcome to Good Weekend Talks, a magazine for your ears featuring in-depth conversations with fascinating people from sport and politics, science and culture, business and beyond. Every week you can download new episodes in which top journalists from across our newsrooms talk to compelling people about the definitive stories of the day. In this episode, we talk to John Polson. You might know him from acting in such films as The Sum of Us, The Boys, Mission Impossible 2, and more recently, The Dry. Or you might know him from some of the TV series he's directed, including The Mentalist, Elementary, The Walking Dead, and the Australian streaming drama The Last Anniversary. But you might not know the remarkable story behind Tropfest, long described as the world's biggest short film festival, which Polson founded and is bringing back after a 6-year absence. The Australian director, producer and actor, who has been based in New York since 1999, founded the festival when a screening of a short film he made drew a surprisingly big crowd at the Tropicana Cafe in Sydney's Darlinghurst in 1993. It expanded into a summer staple, an outdoor film festival beamed around the country with celebrity judges like Nicole Kidman, Russell Crowe, Cate Blanchett and Keanu Reeves, and one that gave a break to a long list of film and TV talents who had made short films. Just days after entries opened for the latest incarnation of the film festival, Polson talks about the high-profile team helping him revive it, how he landed Margot Robbie as jury president, and the highs and controversial lows he's experienced over Tropfest's colourful history. Polson is the subject of a feature story in Good Weekend this Saturday, Renaissance Man, and hosting this conversation is the journalist behind that piece, Sydney Morning Herald senior writer Garry Maddox.
Thanks, Conrad, and welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, Garry.
I guess the first question for a lot of fans of Tropfest is, will the new Tropfest be as good as the old Tropfest?
Well, I'm a little bit biased. I think it's going to be better. And trust me, I love the old Tropfest, but I think what's interesting is all of the great stuff about Tropfest, and there's a lot of it, I think it's fair to say. It's going to be the same, the films, and I've just started to see the films, which is pretty exciting. And, the big live free event, the celebration of young, emerging Australian talent. I mean, all that stuff, none of that's changing. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, it's almost like the old Tropfest on steroids in a lot of ways. I mean, we announced recently, I think everybody knows, Margot Robbie is the president of the jury. So that's incredible for us.
That's a great get. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of amazing stuff happening.
Yeah, and also you've got a really high-powered team behind Tropfest, the revival of Tropfest. Sarah Murdoch's the chair.
Absolutely. Sarah's the chair. Peter V'landys is on the board. The amazing Peter V'landys. Yep. Bryan Brown.
Peter V'landys, of course, is known in New South Wales for his administration of racing and rugby leagues, very high-profile sports and entertainment figure.
Yeah, just an amazing partner on this event because he comes from quite a different world, obviously. But that's one of the things I love about it. When we put our heads together, I bring my sort of experience, I guess, from the sort of arts and culture world, and he brings his incredible experience. And between the two of us and the rest of the board, we make a bit of magic together. It's been good. Yeah.
Tropfest last ran in 2019. Then we had COVID. Were you concerned that Tropfest might never come back?
Oh, absolutely. As each year went by, it seemed harder and harder. This is a big event with a lot of momentum after whatever it was, 25 years at the time. And you sort of don't realize when COVID hit and when we hit the pause button, you kind of assume, oh, well, we'll just unhit the pause button when the time comes. But, people move on. It's like a massive boulder that's been rolling for 30 years. And once it stops, it's a little misleading how hard it is to get it going again. And then the years sort of piled up, to be honest with you. COVID sort of came and went. And still I was, and it was hard because, I'm based in New York, as I think some people know. So I was also working long distance on this event that lives and breathes mostly in Australia. So yeah, it was very challenging, the idea of how we're going to get it back. And as each day went by, it felt further and further away. And I'll be honest, there were many moments I walked around pretty sad thinking maybe this thing's really done. and I'd run into people who knew it, or even into some of the filmmakers that had benefited from it. And that made me even sadder because they were like, "Hey, how's it going? When's it coming back?" And I put a brave face on it, but deep down I was like, "Honestly, this is hard. Unless I'm going to go move out to Australia for 6 months or a year and try and figure this out, I don't know how to do this." And that's when I got that fateful email from Bryan Brown.
That's right. And Bryan Brown had already been in touch, had been in contact with Peter V'landys. Peter V'landys came up with the idea that, having spoken to a young budding filmmaker who was out of university, he'd learnt that there's not a similar pathway for success as into the industry, as there is in, say, racing or rugby league. He came up with the idea of a short film festival, spoke to Sarah Murdoch, spoke to Bryan Brown, and the idea came up with, well, why should we create a new one if Tropfest already existed? And they reached out to you, and you were immediately interested?
Absolutely. I'd had quite a few approaches over the years, but you can sort of tell almost straight away someone wants to take it and do something different with it. Maybe let's put a fence up, let's put ticket prices and all that. So that never felt right. So it wasn't like I wasn't fielding, opportunities. But when Bryan reached out, Bryan in particular was the first email, and obviously I've known Sarah for a very long time as well. I didn't know Peter, and I did know Rich Weinberg, who's also on the board. I didn't know him as well as say Bryan, but it became clear that this was the moment I'd been waiting for, because these were people who firstly understood the event and wanted to bring it back in a way that would reflect what it stood for. And definitely, I've never want to just bring it out of a sort of a vacuum that it's been in. I want Tropfest to be future facing and not be stuck in, I don't want to live in some reminiscent version of Tropfest. But I do want to keep some of the core things, or really all the core things, the same. So when I got that email, and when they mentioned the words not for profit too, that sort of that definitely got my attention as well, because that felt right for Tropfest. It's something, frankly, we'd been trying to do for the last few years, and we hadn't really got there.
You started Tropfest out of the Tropicana Cafe when you wanted to screen a short film that you'd made way back in 1993. How did it develop into this phenomenon where the venues kept getting bigger, the crowds kept getting bigger? It became such a perpetual part of the summer calendar that everybody really looked forward to Tropfest. If they weren't making films, they were turning up on picnic blankets and watching the films. It became this amazing, a huge event with this amazing energy around it.
Yeah, the truth is I don't really know. It was kind of a perfect storm. I do say Tropfest started by accident, and that's very true. I'd love to sit here and say, I sat down one day, there should be this festival that looks like this and supports that. But the truth is I was 26, 27. I was really primarily an actor, but I really wanted to be a director. I'd made a few short films. Some were worse than others, but all of them were relatively mediocre. And I made this one film called Surrey Hills 902 Spring Roll, which I thought was a funny title. And it was a mockumentary it was kind of like taking that show Cops and making it but about food deliverers. I had a friend who was a food courier, and he told me some funny stories about delivering lukewarm spring rolls and getting to fistfights about it and stuff like that. And I thought, that sounds like a movie to me. Keep in mind, I was sitting around the Tropicana Cafe with not a lot going on as a young actor. So I was sort of looking for ideas, made this film. When it came time to screen it, I called all the local cinemas and they wanted $1,000, which I'd never really seen $1,000 in one place before. I was an actor, like I said, and I came from a somewhat, working class family, so I couldn't afford a cinema. But I went to the owner of the Tropicana Cafe on a sort of a spur of a moment. I said, listen, I've made this movie, a lot of it's shot here. Do you mind if I just put a TV in that corner and have a custom crew screening? So that's how it started. And it was never meant to be more than that. But at the end of that screening, where I showed up that night expecting maybe 20 or 30 people, and there was a couple hundred, maybe more, like crowding. So much so, Gary, that really benefited the film because you couldn't see or hear it. And as a result, it was decided that it was quite brilliant. And I can guarantee sitting in a quiet room watching that film, not so much. But anyway, somebody nudged me and said, "Oh, we should do a festival." So I got up on a chair and said, then people were going wild because they'd just seen their own cafe, their own people. There's a scene in the movie I remember where the guy, the food courier deliverer, orders a coffee at the counter, and the guy who gives him the coffee was the same guy working that night, Aldo. So people were just going bananas, and I got their attention and said, "Okay, we're going to have a festival. Here's the deadline. It's in 3 months. You've all got to make films, and I'm going to get more than one television. Trust me, I'm going to make this big." And that was the end of that night. And then I woke up the next morning. I wasn't really drinking or anything. It was almost like a Tropicana hangover where I thought, what did I just do? But maybe they'll forget about it. And nobody forgot about it. Everywhere I went, I couldn't walk the streets without somebody saying, "Oh, I was there the other night. I'm really excited about the event. You should do this. You should do that. You should put a big screen." And all I remember thinking is like, well, why don't you do it? Why do I have to do it? I mean, I wanted to be an actor. So it was sort of The Reluctant Festival Director would be the name of that chapter. And, we did have that first one, and I had no idea. There was no system. There was no website. Of course, in those days, there was nothing. I showed up on the night. I did find 4 televisions. I got them for, I think it was $240 in North Ryde. It was the cheapest place. I got on the Yellow Pages and found them. I borrowed my dad's Tarago and picked them up and brought them to the Tropicana, and had no idea if anyone would even remember. I had put a few posters up and stuff. And like I said, occasionally you'd walk around the streets and somebody would be shooting a movie and they'd look over at me and go, "Oh, there he is. Hey, this is for the festival," and that kind of stuff. And when I got there on the night and set up those TVs, there was literally 1,000 or 1,200 people just out on the street. Obviously, at this point, the traffic couldn't get past. The cops showed up, and it just went bananas, and they tried to shut it down. And fortunately, I talked them into letting it keep going, and the rest is kind of history.
Why was there such an appetite for short films, or was it that Sydney needed an event, a film-based event?
That's a really good question. I think it was, like I said, a bit of a perfect storm. So you have, firstly, it's free, right? Which I like to say is my favorite price. So it was clearly not a price gouge where it wasn't a commercial thing. So that was part of it. But more importantly, there were these young, emerging, very talented often filmmakers with nowhere to show what their talent was, And I can say I auditioned, if you will, or whatever, interviewed for the film schools at the time and didn't get in. They only chose about 4 people a year. Thousands of people would try to get into those spots. So what about all the others, and including me and all the people at those early Tropfests? So I think it was just a big and very Australian. I always say this event, although it's had success globally, it could never actually start in another country. It's too crazy. Let me spend a lot of money on equipment, charge nothing for the tickets, have kind of nobody filmmakers get into it. I mean, it's insane. But in a way, it's very Australian because we are we're such supporters and such celebrators of the underdog. And it's a classic underdog story. The people have come out of Tropfest and gone on to bigger and better things. I mean, they'd be the first to tell you the day before their win at Tropfest, they were just people walking the streets with dreams and ambitions, but no real place to show them. So I think that's how it all really started, and that's what people loved about it and still love about it.
Okay. Was there one particular Tropfest where a talent emerged who may have won it or won a prize there that you thought, wow, this is putting someone on the right path that so many people followed in the footsteps of later?
Well, honestly, not to dodge the question, there have been so many examples of people coming through, and I could sort of list the names. But an early one, since you bring it up, I believe it was in Tropfest 95, I want to say, very, very early on. And up until then, don't forget, this is only like year 3. We started in 93.
Yep.
So, it's fair to say that the films were of questionable quality in the early days. There was no sort of filtering process. If you made a film, you got in. First year there were 9 people made films. So that, some are better than others, let's put it like that. And then about 95, a guy called Gregor Jordan made a film called Swinger. And to this day, it gets a lot of talk, Swinger.
It's a great film.
It's a great film. It's one shot. It's quite a brilliant idea. I want to try to pitch it here. People should just go to our Tropfest, our YouTube channel, and check it out. So that was an amazing moment, and that brought the house down, if you will, even though we're out the street by then. It brought the street down. But what was really interesting is about a month later, Gregor, with that same film, got into the Cannes Film Festival. I think he might have won a prize. So, that really helped put us on the map in the sense of like, oh, wow, wait a minute. You can make a film, get into Tropfest, maybe win. And I don't know. I don't remember the details whether the winning of Tropfest had any impact. I mean, it's Cannes. I don't think they really gave a crap about Tropfest, obviously. But it sort of got a lot of publicity at the same time. It might have helped. And so that was a very early example of somebody. And then, of course, Gregor went on to a pretty big career making films with the likes of Joaquin Phoenix and all the rest of it. So he was a very early example, but we've had countless examples.
Two Hands, I think he made 4 years later, wrote and directed that, and that's now a classic Australian film.
He made Two Hands, he made Buffalo Soldiers and others. So, yeah, it really, I think, and not to speak for Gregor, but I think he would. And I know he would because he came to our launch a couple of months ago, and I think he did a video for us. I think he would say that was a big moment for him, and it set him on a path.
You, of course, appeared in a Tropfest winning film, Nash Edgerton's Deadline. That was interesting that you, as the festival director, would appear in a film, and I gather you decided after that you wouldn't. Yeah,
that was a tricky moment, very tricky moment, and I don't expect anyone to believe what I'm about to say.
Let me just tell them about the film. The film, firstly, Nash is a brilliant director now. Mr. In Between is part of his work, a couple of features as well, The Square. He made a film. He's also a stuntman, and he made a film about getting his Tropfest entry to the Tropfest office in time for the deadline. And once he arrives there, we won't give away the punchline, but you're there seeing him at the office. So ahead.
So very briefly, the very quick backstory is Nash came to me a week before we happened to be in the same building, right? I rented a very, very small space for $90 a week on Bayswater Road, which was the Tropfest headquarters. And when I say it was it's probably 1.5 meters by 3 meters. That's how small it was. It's just me and a desk. And Nash was in the same building. And I didn't really know him that well, but, he's a filmmaker and I was a filmmaker or whatever. So we sort of actor. So we kind of say hi, very friendly. He comes in one day, and I'll keep it short, but he says, listen, I want to enter my film, blah, 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 some other movie. And I said, Nash, I love that film, but wasn't that on at Flickerfest the other week? And he said, yeah. And I said, no, look, dude, that's not really the point of Tropfest. We're trying to get people to make films. This isn't meant to be just dig your film out of the bottom drawer and let me put it up there. For me, making films and continuing to make films is what's going to make you better in film. So one of our rules is we don't take films that have been seen before. And he kind of looked a bit downhearted and walked off. And about 20 minutes later, he came back and he said, listen, all right, I'm going to make a new film. And I said, okay, you realize the deadline's in a week, right? He said, yeah. He said, I've got an idea for it, but there's one catch. You've got to be in it. And I said, Well, all right. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. I mean, at that point, I was too stupid to know that was probably not the greatest idea. And keep in mind, Tropfest was very, very small. It was a couple thousand people would come at that point or whatever. So I said, sure. And I didn't even think it would get in. Not that anything against Nash, but at that point, it was starting to get pretty competitive. I thought I'll just throw him a bone. I said, how long is it going to take? He said, about an hour. I said, fine. No worries. I didn't ask what the idea was or anything. Then he made the film. And as you say, the film, without giving it away, I appear in the end of the film. Lo and behold, it sails right through all the pre-selection, which I kind of oversee. But I think, and this is the part where I was saying I don't expect people to believe me. I was very nervous about this because I did think it was a bit questionable that the festival director would ban the film. Anyway, it sails through all the pre-selection process, gets into the finals. So now I'm starting to get pretty uncomfortable. But I'm thinking there's no way it's going to win, right? There's 16 films. There's just no way. Even though I thought it was good. Not obviously because of my contribution, which was minimal. But anyway, the night of the festival comes along. We're out on the street. I've got a big sheet up for a screen. That's how early it was, and a projector and stuff, and 7,000 people out there. And I remember the panel was pretty impressive. George Miller was on the panel, and others, like 4 or 5 pretty big time people. So we have the night. They do the scores, and then we always have a bit of a chat before. Now all the crowd stampeding and, wanting to know who the winner is, because one of the great things about Tropfest is all very live. So you get 5 minutes between the last film and getting up on the stage. Otherwise, they're going to riot and destroy the street. So, and I'm not a judge. I want to make that really clear. I've never been a judge at Tropfest. I'm just a director. I choose the judges and then they do their thing. So we always have a bit of a chat before so we can sort of write down on the cards who's won and whatever. And we get down to who's won, and they say deadline. And I say, and I've told Nash this story, I don't feel especially proud of it because I did try to change the results. I said, guys, we've got a problem. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, I'm in the film. This is a disaster. Are you saying that's? And they said, oh, okay, well, let us think about it, whatever. I said, look, I don't want to change it, whatever, but this is going to be, look at the crowd. They're going to go crazy and not in a good way. So George and others agreed to just rethink it for a minute or two. I said, look, do your thing. You guys are the judges, but just bear that in the back of your mind. They came back to me a couple of minutes later, and this is gospel. I remember like it was last night. And they said, hey, we hear you, and we do think it's a bit of a problem, but we also don't think it's fair that the best film doesn't win. And I said, all right, well, it's been nice knowing you, and I'll get up there and we'll announce it. And that's what happened. And people went bananas. I think half the people went bananas because it really was a great film, and the response on the night, which is all about Tropfest, right? You can watch these films in a room and maybe pick different winners, but when you watch them in front of the crowd, and when that happens at the end of that film, they went ballistic that night, and that's what the judges responded to. So we got up on the night. Half the people went bananas in a really good way. Half of them called out it was rigged, and of course nobody understands. I'm not one of the judges. Little did they know I tried to talk them out of it. But yeah, for the next really few years, I would walk around the street, and we had a stigma for a long time that Tropfest was rigged and only Polson's friends get in and only Polson's friends win and all this sort of stuff, which is pretty ironic when you really know the true story. But that's what happened. And obviously from that day forward, I've never appeared in a Tropfest film.
That's a great story. You mentioned George Miller, and one of the great things about Tropfest, there are many, the sort of democratic nature of it, the kind of the live event nature of it, the fact that it's in a park, and that it also got live streamed to other cities as well, and was often on TV as well. But one of the great things is you get some very high profile judges who just come along as their down to earth selves and vote on the films, just enjoy the experience just like everybody else. Some of them are actors that you've worked with in the past, like Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe, but there are also some people who are in town making films or in town for other reasons. Keanu Reeves one year, Salma Hayek. How important were the judges to this sort of success of Tropfest, and how hard was it to get them?
Well, I think they're very important. I mean, if I had to pick 3 elements that have made it a sort of a success, 3 ingredients, it's definitely the filmmakers. I'd start with that, the talent and the incredible and I'm not saying listen, I'm not saying they're all like that, but when you see a Tropfest gem, there's really nothing like it. I've always said it's insulting to think of a short film as like a short film. It's its own art form. And when there's a good one, and one of the great things about short film is you can take one tiny little idea and really expand it. You can't do that with a feature film, right? You've got 2 hours to fill. You've got to really tell a big story. But with a short film, you can, and don't forget, the maximum is 7 minutes. There's no minimum. We've had great films that are a minute, 45 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever. So the films is number one. Number two, I really believe the free quality of it, not because people are cheap, but because they sort of see that as a bit of a gift to the city. And they, like I said before, they can see it's not a commercial money grab, which so many things are these days. You think about it. Listen, no one loves some of the, and I won't mention names, these big, massive singers as much as me, but I mean, the ticket prices are insane. They're insane. I mean, I don't know what it's like here, but in America, thousands of dollars to go and see. If that's not a money grab, like what is? So I think when Tropfest is free, that's a massive part of it. The third thing is we do get big names, and whether we want to admit it or not, people kind of like a bit of celebrity. I'm a bit the same, like everybody. And frankly, I know a lot of celebrities who are name droppers. And you can like, hey, you're such and such. How the hell do you get excited about saying? But we all like to see people that have talent that we've seen on screen or whatever, or we just admire from a distance. It's great. So it's a big deal. How hard it is, your second question, it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard. It's a lot of work. It's a big part of my year. This year, I've spent most of the last few months lining up people to come. And it's not that people don't want to do it. Schedules are hard. In the case of Tropfest, a lot of people do know Tropfest. A lot of people don't know Tropfest. And again, not to keep harping on about the money thing, people get a letter about being a judge at a festival. They often don't know that it's a not-for-profit, that we really are just trying to support emerging filmmakers and whatever. So you sort of got to go through that conversation. It really does help that it is a not-for-profit because you can sort of make that clear. It helps to have Sarah as our chair and the rest of the board because people tend to know people who know people and stuff. But there's nothing easy about it. If you want to get, a big name at Tropfest or any event, one thing, the only silver lining is because Tropfest is a 1 weekend thing, whereas most festivals, City Festival, it's 2 weeks. You really have to have judges sticking around for a long time. So that's our one benefit is we can say, hey, you don't have to watch anything before you arrive. There's no homework to do. You show up, watch the movies live with the crowd, score it, and get the hell out of there. So that has helped us, and I think that's been part of why we've had incredible names. But every year is a wrestle. I never rest and go, oh, we'll be fine. It's, but then again, once you get a Margot, like we did in the last week, it definitely makes it a bit easier because now I can go and say, hey, Margot's the president of the jury. Do you want to join? It's a slightly different conversation than it was before.
What's in it for her, John, when you spoke to her? She's hugely successful since Barbie as both a star and a producer. What's a night, in a park surrounded by 60,000 people, watching films and deciding it very quickly with a group of other judges, which is the best? What's in it for her?
That's a great question, Garry. I can't answer for Margot, and I feel like she would have to answer. But I can tell you what's in it for a lot of other people that I know have done it before. A lot of people feel like they've got a lot out of the film industry. They've had a successful career. They've built, something really. They've built a legacy. They've been paid quite well, whatever it is, and they remember what it's like to be starting out. And they want to be part of that. I mean, I find most people are just good people, period. I don't care how big or small or famous or not they are. Most people are really decent people. So the hard part isn't convincing them once you get there. The hard part is getting to them and all that. But I think what's in it for them, in the case of Margot, and I'm just speculating here, Margot is an incredible actor, but she's also a producer with a production company. I would take a wild guess that she's very curious to see who's coming up, some young ideas. What's great about Tropfest is people often don't know the rules, let alone, so they end up breaking the rules without even realizing it, and that can be a wonderful thing. So again, I'm speculating, but I know a lot of people have done Tropfest want to see who's coming up. They want to support. They remember their days of struggling. And in the case of someone like me, and I've had a little bit of a career of my own, I kind of wish there was a Tropfest when I was starting out because it might have made things a lot easier. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. And it's just, and especially for the Aussies, there's a certain pride around Tropfest, I think, because it was born here. And, I remember there was this great email that circulated a few years ago. How do you know you're an Aussie? You love Vegemite, you do this, you do that. At number 11 or whatever was something like, you know what Tropfest is and you love it or something. So I think a lot of the Aussies feel a sense of, which I embrace, sense of ownership and a sense of celebration around it. And again, not speaking for Margot at all, but I can tell you from past experiences, those are some of the reasons people want to be a judge.
Yeah. I'll tell listeners who don't know about your own directing career. You've done a lot of television, American TV, The Mentalist, Elementary, The Walking Dead, the Australian streaming drama The Last Anniversary just this year. But you've also directed 4 films, Siam Sunset, Tenderness, Hide and Seek, and Swim Fan. So you've had quite a prolific career for somebody who didn't go to film school, and quite a prolific acting career, which has included all sorts of things like the miniseries Vietnam and Barlow and Chambers A Long Way Home, The Sum of Us, many people remember you opposite Russell Crowe in that great film, The Boys, Mission Impossible 2, and just fairly recently The Dry as well. So, and you didn't go to acting school as well. So there's a lot of drive to establish your own career as an actor and director. It's amazing you've had time to actually be a film festival, the creator of this great film festival as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Garry. When you rattle it off like that, it does. I'm proud of some of the stuff I've done, but I'm also at a certain age. It's like at this point, you better have done something. It's been a balance, to be honest. There have been times where I've thought, wow, if I didn't put all this energy into Tropfest, I could put it into my own career. But honestly, I love Tropfest. And it's more than half my age now too. It's literally more than half my life. I don't mind saying I turned 60 this year and I started when I was 27. So it's obviously a big legacy to me. I truly love directing and producing and acting as well. So I don't want to take anything away from that. But what Tropfest does give me, it gives me a lot of the creative outlet stuff, but also I love the sort of challenge of creative thinking around how are we going to do this? Because this is impossible. How are we going to convince this person to give us this support or this money or whatever it is? And there's that part of my brain that doesn't really get as exercised with the directing. I mean, probably does with the producing television. It's a similar part of the brain, but yeah, it's kind of a great balance for me. But it also is not about me. The directing stuff is wonderful, and it's a pretty traditional career in that sense. But the idea of building a platform that springboards other people, younger people that I recognize myself in, I mean, what's better than that,
Yeah.
What's better than that? What's better than running into someone at a party, maybe even LA, who says, hey, I won in blah, 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 or even I was a finalist in the late 90s and you don't know this, but that changed my life. And here I am and I'm doing Not that LA is the be-all, end-all, but it might be LA. I'm doing this and that, and it's made a huge impact. I mean, in a weird way, that gives me a lot more satisfaction, or a different satisfaction than, say, making a TV show or something that people have enjoyed.
Just to finish off, John, is there one particular year at Tropfest that you thought, wow, everything's come together, this is magnificent, and one year where you look back and think, wow, that was awful?
Well, I'm a glass half full guy, so I'm sure there has been a terrible year that I've blocked out, so it's hard for me to think about that one. No, actually, I'll give you a year there. The positive year might have been the Domain. When we first rocked up to the Domain, I think it would have been 2000.
Okay.
Which was still very young when you think about it. We're only 7 years in. We'd started the Trop. We went to Rushcutters Bay Park. They said, you're never going to fill Rushcutters Bay Park. We outgrew Rushcutters Bay Park in 2 years. And then I said, we're going to the Domain. And that's when they really wanted to sit me down and say, dude, you're out of your mind. You need some serious medication. There's just no way a short film festival is going to fill the Domain. And I didn't believe it either, to be honest. But I said, let's just go for it, And that year, when I rocked up that day, and it was packed. I mean, you couldn't move. And all the naysayers had said, there's no way, people aren't interested in short films, like not at that level. So I would say if it was 2000, that year was pretty amazing. In terms of, if I had to pick one year, I've only skipped Tropfest maybe twice, okay? And for work reasons, just like I literally couldn't get out of it. And it's never a good idea because as much as we have an amazing team, you sort of, you need to be around, And I filmed one a year that I wasn't there. And I'm not saying that's why I won either, because as I said, I'm not on the jury. But I feel like, and I don't even remember the name of the film. It's a bit homophobic, It was a bit, maybe it was even transphobic. I don't remember the details, but it was not our finest moment. And we got a lot of criticism, which at the time was really painful, but in hindsight, kind of had to happen. That was not a big moment for us, I think it was Centennial Park. Like I said, the only silver lining for me is it happened to be one of 2 years that I just wasn't there for work reasons. But that was a good navel-gazing moment where I thought, you know what? We should be doing better. This can't become a boys' club. This can't become, about films that maybe don't deserve to have a platform to win just because, I don't know, they're popular for a moment or they tap into a certain part of the crowd or whatever it is. So yeah, that was not our finest moment, but onwards.
Yeah, and but there are many other memorable moments. So many Tropfests. I've covered it for many years, and each year there was just a tremendous buzz in the park, and people were talking about it for weeks afterwards. It's been great talking to you again, John. We wish you all the best with this next version of Tropfest. Hope it's a great success, and hope that you unearth some great filmmakers there as well. So thanks for talking to us.
Thanks so much, Garry. I really, really appreciate your support.
That was actor, director and Tropfest founder John Polson speaking with Sydney Morning Herald senior writer Garry Maddox for the latest Good Weekend Talks. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, rate and comment wherever you get your podcasts, and keep tuning in for more compelling conversations. Coming soon, we chat to former TV personality and comedian Tanya Lacey, an Aussie broadcast star of the 1980s, about the drama and trauma associated with crashing out of that career and picking up the pieces decades later. Good Weekend Talks is brought to you by the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, proud newsrooms powered by subscriptions. To support independent journalism, search Subscribe Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. This episode of Good Weekend Talks is produced by Conrad Marshall and edited by Tim Mummery, with technical assistance from Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, Tom McKendrick is head of audio, and Melissa Stevens is the editor of Good Weekend.